about stepping up? Bang!
It's time to level up your game. Introducing the all-new ESPN app. All of ESPN, all in one place. Your home for the most live sports and the best championship moments.
The electricity is palpable.
Step up your game with no annual contract required. It's the ultimate fan experience. Level up for more on the ESPN app or at stream.espn.com. Sign up now.
Una silla de masajes puede parecer extravagante. 8 configuraciones diferentes, intensidad ajustable, además es calefaccionado. Y se siente tan bien. Sí, una silla de masajes puede parecer extravagante. Y 2, bueno, aún más. Pero cuando esas sillas de masajes vienen con un auto, se vuelven bastante prácticas. El nuevo Volkswagen Tiguan 2025 con funciones premium como los asientos delanteros con masaje disponibles. Solo parece extravagante.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Checking off the boxes on your to-do list is a great feeling. And when it comes to checking off coverage, a State Farm agent can help you choose an option that's right for you. Whether you prefer talking in person, on the phone, or using the award-winning app, it's nice knowing you have help finding coverage that best fits your needs. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This summer, try the new Strato Frappuccino blended beverage at Starbucks. It's the classic blended iced coffee you know and love, now topped with a creamy layer of handcrafted brown sugar cold foam. Available for a limited time. Your Strato Frappuccino is ready at Starbucks.
Welcome back to another episode of Eagles Edge. I'm Eagles Eric, and my co-host Sam Finkel should be joining around halfway. But today we're going live, and I'm going to take some questions from the audience, so we'll let some of you guys trickle in here. But we got a ton of mailbag submissions, and I'm just going to start going through them. This one's from Sean Quinto. Is it possible that Howie goes for a CB2 free agent and a DT4 free agent before the season starts? And my answer to this is it's very unlikely. I think if they are to go and try to upgrade those positions, it would be via trade. Potentially, if there's a player who's unexpectedly cut that they think could add some value, then certainly that's a possibility. But overall, I would say it's a low likelihood, especially for DT. I feel like they're happy with their rotation. They've got plenty of guys. Like, we don't even know if Byron Young's going to make the team, but I don't see them necessarily thinking they need to upgrade at that position. For CB, as Fangio said, they don't really know who is going to win that job yet. So, for example, if there's some kind of veteran who's already made their cash this season but got cut for some kind of, so they could save money in the future, and the Eagles don't really have to pony up much cash to bring them in, that's a situation which I could see them bringing in a CB2. I think they're probably going to ride with what they got. And then if it's not working, then maybe, weeks 3, weeks 4, you start to see them try to make something happen there. Thanks for the question, Sean. For those who are trickling in, feel free to write in the chat, and I'll take some questions from the chat as well. How's it going, everyone? Hey, Krabby. Hey, Jirok. Ringo, yeah, I should talk about him. For people who don't know, I made a Ringo film breakdown video a few months ago, and I thought that he could be serviceable CB2. I think there's 2 major problems. One is confidence. It's something I had talked about many times. I had always got the feeling that he was a player who really needed to be confident to play at his best, and one of the leading indicators was his various teammates trying to talk him up for no particular reason, almost like it seemed like they're trying to encourage him. And it seems like he may have lost that, which is unfortunate. I would want a guy who they get beat by Jamar Chase and they get mad about it and they make sure that thing never happens again. And I'm reading the tea leaves. That could be the case. Maybe he's grinding, but the reports from camp are he's fallen out of favor. And the second problem is the lateral agility. Now, I thought they could probably overcome it to some extent. There are ways to insulate the coverages where you're not going to expose him in space as much to people who have tons of lateral agility, whether you're going to give him inside help and have him really use his leverage, have him play cover 2 where he's kind of underneath, and that's less relevant because he's releasing anything vertically. I think they still could do that, but they probably don't want to do that. So, but yeah, between those two things, I think it's probably why he fell out of favor. I never thought that he was like a high-end cornerback, and that, you know, I would say overall, I'm less optimistic about what he could be than I was a few months ago. But he is still 22, and people want to talk about, oh yeah, but he's had all these years. But where are the reps? Like, you still need live reps against good players to make that matter. So I don't think he's necessarily had enough experience to be able to improve significantly, and he is still a year younger than Quinyon. Yeah, I agree with that. Travis makes a great comment here. He needs Jalen Mills' confidence. I think he'd be a dramatically better player if he thought he was the best guy out there. He does seem to play skittish. And you can see it. Like, if you're playing 12 yards off against Cedric Tillman, and then you're bailing immediately and turning your hips, that is playing skittish. Like, you're not trusting yourself. And that's what makes it very easy to get out of position. And then on the Jamar Chase touchdown, yeah, everyone in the league's going to give up that out. And if it's perfectly timed, perfectly thrown ball, good luck trying to defend it. But he's so frantic to try to get over there to push the guy out that he takes the worst angle in history. And I don't think it's necessarily a commentary on him, like, not understanding angles or anything like that. And yes, it's exacerbated by his tight hips, but I think it's much more a commentary on his mindset, which is, oh shit, I better go push this guy out of bounds. And by the time he's over there, he has all his momentum going one way. Jamar Chase pivots inside and it's game over. So I actually think it was, in that specific play, probably less physical and more mental. I got a great question from MNAT, which is, do you think Ringo can play safety? And I think the real question is, can he play it at a higher level than cornerback? And at this time, that's a fairly low bar. And, you know, it's a different skill set. It's a different perspective. But I think Occam's razor tells you the way safeties move around the field, it's less predicated on moving laterally, more predicated on moving north-south. And in that sense, yes, I do think he'd be better suited for safety from a physical perspective. Also, he's tall and rangy, and he's fairly physical. Like, he can make tackles in open space. But going back to the mindset thing, Matt, like, everything that's problematic at corner, that might get even amplified at safety when you're the last line of defense and you cannot be frantic. You're going to be guarding passes that are hanging in the air. Are you going to commit pass interference? Like, are you going to get tangled with the receiver? We know he's not great at ball tracking. So I don't necessarily think that would do him any favors other than, like, catering more to his physical skill set. But I do think probably he would be better with equal experience at safety than at corner. All right. I believe if you're watching this and you're on YouTube, I believe I get the comments. So if you're on Twitter writing comments, just pop over to the YouTube Eagles Ping Pong Network and you can write in your comments there. Getting into the next question. In your estimation, which on the bubble players have trade value and could be moved from now until final cut down? And the way I really think about this is, are there players that they want to cut that another team has a positional need for, and they've got that same piece for the Eagles? And we've already seen multiple examples of this with the trade for Bennett, who may have been cut by the Raiders. with the Harrison Bryant trade, who was going to be cut by the Eagles. And when you're 32nd on the waiver wire, you want to make those deals because those guys probably you're not going to have an opportunity to sign them as long as they're not a vested veteran. So could there be more of those deals on the horizon? Yes. If they were to make another trade, though, my guess is it would be someone who's not on the bubble, who maybe has more significant value to patch one of these holes if they think that they have them. A lot of people talk about cornerback. Some people talk about safety. I don't hear a lot of people talking about edge rusher. And when you look at the edge rusher contracts, well, other than Hunt and Smith, there's 0 players who are signed in 2026. And you're going to need 4 or 5 total. So this is going to have a totally different roster next year at the edge position. Do you try to make that investment now? 3 third-rounders, 2 fourth-rounders, 4 fifth-rounders. Is there a possibility that you can go out for an edge rusher right now? And, I like Hunt, but I love him as a 3. I don't think he's probably not an amazing 2. And I think you want a guy with some run defense chops. We've got 1 million designated pass rushers. Whoever is going to make the team between Ojulari, Uche, Antoine Powell-Ryland, and Agbo Okoronkwo, probably 2 of those 4, probably the first 2. Those are designated pass rushers. They can't play a lick in run defense. And so you potentially have 4 or 5 edge rushers, and none of them are like what you'd consider like a typically stout run defender. Like Nolan Smith is a freak in the sense that he can destroy pulling guards and stuff like this, but he's still not like this typical burly edge who can just like completely condense space and corkscrew against double teams or anything like this. And then sometimes they'll walk the linebacker down, and and obviously those guys are light to be able to pull that off. So if I had to try to find a team, there's some teams that have so many defensive linemen, like Broncos, like Seahawks. One guy I thought of is Carl Granderson on the Saints. That would be interesting. Some of that, for the veteran guys who aren't on rookie contracts, that probably precludes them from being traded for unless the original team is willing to pay a lump sum of money, because it's very clear that Lurie wanted to save some money. They could have spent 5 or 10 million more right now, but they wanted some of that extra cap rollover for these big extensions coming up, and they wanted to save some cash. That's why he sold some of the team, and that's why they didn't pony up for some of these free agents that they could have actually paid for, like Slay, like Rodgers. They had a deal. They had an offer out to Milton Williams throughout the season. He bet on himself, and then he went for way more money than they'd ever willing to. And then, like every single guy they signed was essentially a bargain deal, bottom of the barrel. Ojulari might have been the most at 3 million. All right. See some other comments here. Travis says, I haven't heard much talk about this. Are we confident in the abilities of the new offensive coordinator? I would say nobody outside the organization knows. I would say there are people in the organization who don't know. Because, Tyson says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Kevin Patullo might go out there with a script that he thinks is going to absolutely destroy the Cowboys defense. He studied Matt Eberflus, and here's exactly what I think he's going to do. And here's Trayvon Diggs is hurt and Overshown's hurt, and we're going to attack these guys. And then you get out there and you have a bad snap. And then you have the Dickerson's replacement blow block and you get sacked. And then you have an operational issue. And then it's all of a sudden it's like, okay, what is he actually made of? You may be able to even claim that Kevin Patullo doesn't know how good he's going to be. So I would be lying if I had a prediction. If I had to guess based off context clues, I think he'll be middle of the road. So maybe you call it halfway between Kellen Moore and Brian Johnson. I do think Brian Johnson was unfairly ridiculed. There was some really bad play sequencing issues, but I think he was more like moderately bad instead of the worst ever. and I thought Kellen Moore was moderately good. We will see. All right, this one's from Abai. How do you feel about Jacorian CB kick Coop outside and McWilliams as the nickel compared to Jackson and Ringo? I don't want to put DeJean outside. I think he's much better suited for the nickel. He was close to a Pro Bowl level at the nickel. We don't know how good McWilliams would be right away. So for me, it's clear I would put Bennett on the outside, keep DeJean in the nickel, and then you could put DeJean and at safety in base. I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, if you decide that you love Makuba, then you can just put DeJean on the outside in base. I'm totally fine with that because he would have more run stopping duties and there's no problems there. Whereas Bennett, there's major problems. You don't want to have him anywhere in base. You don't want Adoree Jackson in base. And I can't imagine that they would like trot Ringo out there just for base. Like either he's going to play or he's not. So yeah, overall, like I don't want to shuffle DeJean around. Okay. So I'm going to take some more mailbag and then I'll get back to the chat. With the injuries to Dickerson and Green, do the Eagles need outside help at guard like Brandon Scherf? And I think someone can write in the comments, I think Scherf may have just retired. So, they have a lot of offensive linemen. Like, I'd like to think they have someone in-house who they can go to, probably Matt Pryor. And at this point, like, there's not a lot of good free agents out there. But I guess if there's any position where you could find like a serviceable plug and play guy who's like 34 years old and not signed, it's probably guard. So in that sense, yes. But like, I just rather have a guy who's been with Stoutland for some time and you want synergy with your offensive line mates. Like his whole philosophy is like predicated around combo blocks. So ideally you wouldn't have to go outside the organization. Can you find data on teams that keep practice stats and see if they correlate to regular season performance from Kayuma? I don't, like, to my knowledge, there's not much practice stats out there. Maybe just random beat reporters, no kind of like official portal or database. Probably a better question is preseason. How much does that correlate? And it's almost nothing. I think the one team like that it does for is Ravens. I remember reading about how the Ravens preseason performance has predicted their regular season performance to some measurable degree. But outside that, I would put little to no stock in preseason performance in terms of evaluating a team. If you're going to talk about some kind of depth player and their actual ability, I think there's some signal there, but you still have to understand the context of who they're going against. If they're going against the third string defensive back on the Bengals when their first string is bad, if you're not beating him, you probably shouldn't be in the NFL. From Yako Warner, I understand how EPA, expected points added, works, but can you explain the underlying model? Was it based on historic data? Does it get updated with rule changes? We'll leave this on the screen. So the way expected points added works is there are multiple models. So depending on where you go and get this information, you may be seeing a different value. And that's because it's calculated differently. What it attempts to do is quantify the impact of every play by taking in the situational factors like down, distance, part of the field, time left in the half, and determine how much closer is that getting you to a scoring opportunity. And it's giving you fractional credit towards that eventual score as you matriculate down the field. So a toy example would be you score a 5-yard touchdown. Well, historically, in first and goal from the 5, how often do teams score? How often do teams get a touchdown? How often do they get a field goal in that situation? How often do they turn it over in that situation? And all of those historical precedences go into an algorithm, which in the most popular model, which is on NFL FastStar, is a gradient boosted tree model. So this is a bunch of decision trees that it'll say something to the effect of, here was the situation. This happened. Did they score? And then it stacks hundreds and hundreds, and I think in the case of EPA, it's like 512 decision trees, something like that, on top of each other to be able to extrapolate to every situation that could happen in a game. And that way, you could imagine if there was only one data point, like if only one team ever had a 1st and 17 from their own 40-yard line, and there's 2 minutes 12 in the half, and they're down 6 points or whatever, and they go on to score in that scenario, well, then now you only have one reference of data point, like how likely are they to score in this situation. So that doesn't help you predict what's going to happen in the future. You have to attribute a value of the likelihood they are to score in any scenario at the point at which they are in that time. And so by stacking all these scenarios on top of each other, what you have done is you've created kind of this more smooth trend of generally you're expected to score 2 points in this scenario. And maybe there's only one specific example of a team in the past being in the exact scenario you are, but there's a bunch that are really close. Maybe they were, instead of 1st and 17, everything was exactly the same, but it was 1st and 10. And what did they go on to eventually do? That was probably a very poor explanation. But yes, it is based on historic data. The update is, to me, in my understanding, it's more like periodic. So they'll have it trained on, like, I think the most recent one is like 15 or 16 seasons, at least that. And then there's periodic updates. Oh, and factoring in the last season. So it is an interesting question, because ultimately what we're trying to determine is, in any given situation, how likely are you to score? And then if you've moved closer to scoring by advancing down the field, well, now your expected points goes up. And the difference between where you were and where you are after that play, that's your expected points added. And so over time, that can change for, like you said, rule changes, how the defenses play, even stuff like the proportion of red zone possessions for good teams compared to bad teams. Like if that disparity grew for whatever reason in one year, well, now the underlying EPA model would be trained on a different distribution. And then it would spit out a value that's not representative of the current time. But I'd be happy to get into more detailed discussion of that, where I could kind of write it out and potentially give visuals and diagrams, because just talking about it, I don't think does a very good job of explaining how it works. All right. Also, I would recommend go to NFLoasis.com. It's my new site. It actually works fast now, and it does explain to some degree how these type of models work. But I'd be happy to discuss more one-on-one. Do you expect Nolan Smith to exclusively pass rush from the right side or both sides? So this is alluding to a post I made earlier this year, just talking about how Nolan Smith's pass rushing impact was greater from the right side in his very limited sample. And a reporter asked a question to Fangio about this, and he said the reason was because Smith's shoulder, this was talking about in this preseason, why he's exclusively rushed from one side, is that his left shoulder got tweaked. And when you're rushing from the right side, that inside shoulder is what engages, really that whole inside arm. So they wanted to protect that left shoulder. So when you put him on the left side, it's that right arm that's doing most of the driving, whether it's in run defense or in a long arm situation. So that's the reason. Will that change? It may. And people have talked about this. Do I think there's merit that he could be better at run defense on the left and better at pass rushing on the right? Yeah, I actually do think that's the case. All right, we got some chats here. Scherf did retire. Okay. Maybe I'll just do some rapid fires because we got quite a few. I have a fair amount of faith in Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt. I worry about health. Would they kick one of the DTs out to edge in a situation if they wanted to go heavy? I think it's a good point. If you know the other team is in heavy personnel, 12, 13 personnel, 21, 22 personnel, or they just have a bunch of giant players, you can do that. They did it last year. They had snaps where they outside at times, and he did play on the outside. He had a snap. I forget if it was the first or second preseason game. He had a snap on the outside and won a pass rush. So absolutely, they could put an extra DT out there. Jirok asked, how many years of data for the EPA model? How many years of data it's trained on? I got to go check this. Last I saw, I thought I saw 2005 was the initial year, but I can go track that down and see the contemporary model. What is that based off of? It's managed by Ben Baldwin, Computer Cowboy, if anyone's. Can you describe your new stat, Oasis? What makes it better than EPA DVOA? Yes. Okay. So sorry about that, guys. Let me know if you can hear the audio. Audio's back. Can you see me or not? All right, I'm just going to keep going. So the question is, can I describe my new stat, Oasis? So I just pick up where I left off. I wanted to do a better explanation for EPA. So in football, you only get points added to your total when you score the touchdown. Obviously, 6 points, you get 3 points for a field goal, 2 points for a safety, 1 point for an extra point. But everything else you did gave you the chance to score whatever those points were. So you're incrementally working towards a scoring play. The most touchdowns happen from the 1 yard line. The second most touchdowns happen from the 2 yard line, so on and so forth. And so the farther you move away from the opponent's end zone, the less likely you are to score. All of this is obvious. So EPA tries to quantify to what extent are you less likely to score as you move away from the end zone. And that includes the down. That includes the distance to go to the first down. That includes the field position. That includes the time left in the half. And so if I'm on my own 5 yard line and it's 3rd and 12, and, there's 12 seconds to go in the half, the chance that I score any points is so infinitesimal that my expected points is near 0. And my co-host has joined.
How's it going?
Hey, Sam.
How's the live stream going
so
far? Oh, you can't hear me?
It's actually a problem with my audio. Okay, I just want to finish what I'm talking about, and then I'll fix it. So the chance of scoring in that situation is so infinitesimal that expected points model says you're expected to score essentially 0 or fractionally more than 0. But boom, all of a sudden I get this 95-yard touchdown right at the end of the half on 3rd and 12. Well, now I get the full plus 6.8 because there's a 95% chance I'm going to make the extra point. So like 6.9 points, that's my expected points added. But instead, let's say I was 1 yard away on 1st and goal. Well, now the chances of scoring 6 or 7 points is extremely high. So if I do end up converting that, my expected points added on the play that I actually score is probably really small, like +1, +1.5 or something like that. So what Oasis does is, and I'm just fixing my headphones. Sam, talk real quick.
Hello.
Okay, perfect. So what Oasis does is it takes that baseline EPA model and then it figures out how good is your opponent, because you don't want that same play against the Carolina Panthers from 2024 to count the same as if you did it against the Broncos. So it has a correction factor for opponent. And the way it does that is it looks at the opponent, how good let's say you're looking at their defense and you're looking at your offensive Oasis. So it's going to say, if I scored, let's just say the baseline for a given play, like a 10-yard pass from the middle of the field on 1st and 10 is like +1. Okay. And I do that against the Broncos. Well, that's probably like +1.2 because if you look at the Broncos' previous performances, they went up against a bunch of offenses and they did good against some good offenses. So that tells the model not only is their defensive oasis good, but it factors in the fact that their opponents were potentially good. And it loops through the opponents of the opponents, and the opponents of their opponents 10 times. And so it really is a robust way of correcting for opponent strength because and I'll give you an example to make this make sense. Let's say we thought the Broncos are really good defensively because they kept putting up the best defensive oasis scores week after week. Boom, 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 boom. They're really good. But then they get up against a juggernaut offense like the Ravens or the Bills, and they have a terrible performance. Well, now we need to understand, like, not only how good did they do relative to the people they did good against or the people they did bad against, but how did the Bills and Ravens do against those people? And so it just keeps going down that tree 10 times. And what happens is over time, it gets this stabilized value of opponent strength that properly corrects kind of for all of the differences in each team's schedule. That's one part of it. The second part of it is situational leverage. So if you make a play that significantly swings your win probability, so I'll give you an example. Dallas Goedert, when he had that huge play against the Saints and ran for a zillion yards in the fourth quarter, that swung the win probability like 25% or something like that. Well, if I gave that the same EPA value as every other play from that yard line and that down and distance, it wouldn't capture the fact that in that situation, that was much more valuable. And if you can repeatedly make good plays in high leverage situations, you're a better player. That's like Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is pretty good in an average situation. And when the stakes get highest, he's really good. The last part is consistency. So if you're consistently good, you get a boost. If you're consistently bad, you get a penalty. And there's a small factor for recency. And the reason that exists is because how you play in week 12 is a much more representative of who you are as a team than how you play in week 1. And throughout the season, essentially until week 18, where there's a lot of funny business going on, you're always learning more about the team, and how they're playing at the end matters more to how they're going to play in the playoffs. So there's a small correction for that. That's all the improvements that it makes on EPA. And how do you know if it's better? Well, there's really two ways. Is it more predictive? And the answer is yes. And does it match your intuition better? And when I look at the weekly percentile, so on the website, if you go to NFLoasis.com and you select a team, you'll see if you scroll down, it'll show you relative to every offensive and defensive performance over the last 2 years, how good was their performance percentile-wise. And the numbers check out because I just was very attuned to what the Eagles did last year, and you'll see like the percentiles make a lot of sense, and then they're better when you juxtapose them versus EPA. Where there's some games where it's a big difference. Trying to think of a specific example, like the Cowboys game. I think their defensive EPA would have been like in the 70th percentile, but then by Oasis it was like 98th percentile or something like that. Jurak, sorry, Sam, but I just want to finish this. How do you factor high leverage situations? It seemed like it'd be difficult to define for a statistical model. It's retroactively determined. Every play that causes a big win, well, it's not just like binary, it's scalar. So the more that a play swings win probability, the more of a factor it has on the adjustment. So if you went from, I have a 12% chance to win, and then I make a big play, and now I have a 37% chance to win, well, now that play gets boosted by a factor of that win probability gain. So in that case, like a 3 times boost. Whereas if you made a big play, but your win probability went from 40 to 41, well, then it's just neutral. No adjustment, or essentially what's equivalent to no adjustment. So it does get factored in every play. Sounds like reinforcement learning rollouts. I guess that's what he's saying. Yeah, it is like that. So, hey, Sam.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing great. So I'm just going to keep going with where we left off in the
Let's do it.
mailbag. So why don't you hit this one?
Well, I know what you're going to say because, Moro Ojomo is one of your flag plant guys. But honestly, I think they could be very comfortable either way, right? So again, the question is, could Moro Ojomo be a full-time starter, or is he best suited as a passing down player behind Jordan Davis? And I think what's interesting about their situation is they have the luxury of being able to kind of do both and kind of, as the season goes, make a better determination. I do think Moro Ojomo could be a full-time starter, but I think having Jordan Davis carve a role out, and I feel like you can be very comfortable playing both and rotating both. That's kind of what I would say.
So what did you think I was going to say?
I think you are one of the biggest Moro Ojomo supporters and early Moro Ojomo supporters I really would like to add. And so I think you would advocate on behalf of his full-time starting potential. And I think there's validity to that. And I think it's important. I think at the end of the season, when his stat line is, and I believe in the magic that you have, shared throughout the video breakdown that you did and throughout these mailbags. I do believe in Moro Ojomo. And I think if he has the year that you said, another thing Eagles Eric got right. So feel good about that.
Let me see it.
What do you think?
So I think it's a loaded question. I don't even agree with the premise. Like, the first thing I would say is, what constitutes a full-time starter?
Sure.
Is that some certain number of snaps? Is that you're playing on some certain downs?
Is that actually starting, right? Is that like being the first guy out there? I get what you're saying.
And the answer to, let's just answer each of those. Will he be out there on the first play? No, he won't be. It'll be Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter.
Mm-hmm.
Will he play more snaps than Jordan Davis? I think probably, yeah. And do I think he's best suited as a passing down player? Yeah, I do. I think he's better as a pass rusher than he is as a run stopper. And also, if he's playing on a rundown, he's going to be next to none other than Jordan Davis. I think when he's playing, let's call it as a 3 technique, and he needs to get to the outside and beat a reach block, I think he's good for that. He's got a lot of agility. He can keep the offensive lineman at bay with his ultra long arms, and he has high motor. Do I want him corkscrewing in the middle as a 2-eye against some behemoth guard? Absolutely not. So that's why you have Jordan Davis. That's why you accepted the 5th-year option.
Sure.
And I will say this, I think I was a little bit off base because previously I'd said, like, really harped about Jordan Davis as a nose. But remember, they only played 10% base. And what I should be talking about is Jordan Davis as a 3 technique. And it's amazing what he can do. And a lot of times they're canceling gaps. So between slanting or just 2-gapping, or what I see Davis do, which is just have the offensive linemen clog the gaps. He just kind of prevents them from advancing, and then no holes actually develop. As long as you don't get turned, the offensive linemen are just going to be in the way of the running back. That's really his superpower. So, everyone knows I love Ojomo, but I do think he's much better suited on pass downs. But in those situations where you have a team where they're running a lot of outside zone, absolutely you want him on the field. All right.
I like that answer.
Next one. Does John Metchie make an impact on this year's Eagles team? To what extent? And I know you just got done a John Metchie episode on Inside the Bird, so I'd invite everyone to go check that out. But yeah, what do you got?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I obviously like Metchie. One of my good friends actually coached both Metchie and Jahan Dotson at Petty Academy in New Jersey. So quick shout out to him and to them, which is cool. And Metchie he adds a lot to the receiver room. I like him. Is he going to come in and be the 3 receiver? Probably not. He could potentially throughout the season, but are they going to use him? Yeah, sure. I could see it being very feasible that he gets thrown into some situations, especially with Johnny Wilson now being out for the year. Honestly, I was super interested to see how they were going to handle that situation, and I'm not shocked to see one of those guys out for the year with a surgery. I'm not going to say anything more about that, but I'm not shocked to see that to, retain all 7 of those guys. But yeah, I could see him, it's not going to be anything crazy. I mean, if you look at the Eagles, and especially with their target percentage, they really only historically have given the ball, to A.J. Brown, to Devonta Smith, to Dallas Goedert. Those are like the main pass catchers. And then guys fill in, and there is value in filling in those areas. But should one of those guys get out, I mean, you feel pretty good about Metchie playing, the slot position or the Z position. You don't feel great about him at X, but basically it's another option for them. One thing I did point out in the Inside the Birds, Inside the Data episode is that his slot percentage was like 51%. So, you're adding another element there, and they don't want Devonta Smith to play the slot as much as he did last year. So I think that there's a chance, especially in the slot position, that he could see the field.
Yeah. I'd really like to see in the slot is A.J. Brown.
Sure.
But I think there's a few reasons why they don't do that. 1, because he's by far the best on the outside. 2 is Hurts likes throwing outside the numbers. And 3 is a lot of times when you're lined up, like you're a stud receiver lined up in the slot, you're generally like going across the field. And from what I've heard, maybe they don't want to expose him to as many like big hits over the middle because everyone knows how valuable he is. But how about some stacks bunches where you have him inside and then you get some rub on like a slot fade? I think that would be absolute money.
Absolutely. I think Metchie could do that pretty well. Metchie also plays with a little bit of toughness, and I think if he gets on the field, like especially for his frame, I mean, he's 5'11", like 187 or something like that. He plays pretty tough for that frame, and I think he'll endear himself to people should he get on the field.
All right, next one. The Eagles will likely keep 6 receivers: AJ, Devontae, Dotson, Metchie, Cooper.
This question is moot.
It's only 5.
Well, it's between Anais and Johnny Wilson, but Johnny Wilson, with the announced season-ending injury, makes this question moot. But it's a fun thought exercise what they would have done if Johnny Wilson did not have the season-ending injury.
I went back and I watched the Browns game with Cooper. I watched Cooper's routes because obviously people know like Eagles hardly threw in that game, and they didn't
you compare him to Pierre Garçon?
Yeah, I wrote that on Twitter. I don't think he's as good as Pierre Garçon, but there is a lot of similarities. He's just not quite like you could see Pierre Garçon when he came off the line. He had a lot of juice, and like Cooper, he's a little bit slow to get up to speed, but everything else other than that, I love. He plays really physically for his body type. He's pretty darn good at changing direction. He can catch the ball away from his frame. He's a nightmare for small cornerbacks to try to tackle. So I would definitely love to keep him around. And like you talk about screen game, that's all the people want to talk about with Johnny Wilson. He's in there from the screen game. Well, then you're just telegraphing the screen game. Oh, look, Johnny Wilson and Anais Smith in a stack on the outside. Whereas Darius Cooper, he's like, they lined him up a lot in the slot. So I do wonder, like, if they see him more as that Z and they had him in some motions and shifts as opposed to an X, even though a lot of people have compared him to like AJ Brown.
Well, we had a comment from, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Jarek. He says, we lack a backup X unless you believe in Cooper. And he's kind of right. I mean, if you look at everyone on the team, I mean, there's not really a guy you feel comfortable just throwing in there. I mean, Cooper is an option, but that boundary receiver position it's a tough one in the NFL, and it's becoming. I wonder what you think, but is it becoming more important or less important over the modern NFL offenses to have a star and then a backup boundary receiver?
My feeling is less. And it's not that it is not important. I think it's twofold. First, I think there are less of them than there used to be. And I think there's way more hyper talented Z type receivers.
Absolutely.
There really wasn't like Amon-Ra, St. Brown's, a bunch of those type of players years ago. Probably the closest comparison would be Antonio Brown. And that, there's a laundry list of these guys, the Lad McConkeys, even CeeDee Lamb. I would be hard pressed to say that he's an X. He's way more of a Z.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot more of these guys. Even Jamar Chase he's playing more Z. And then they have Higgins as on the outside boundary guy on the line of scrimmage. So it's just like going way towards that. And I think it's because offensive coordinators know how to weaponize the slot option more. I mean, we didn't even really get a ton of 11 personnel until like the Welker days. So it's like, if you think about that, there's this like 10-year lagging pipeline from college to the NFL.
Another thing that's a really important that you didn't touch on, but I feel like you could probably talk about this forever, is just the hash marks, right? When you look at the transition from the college game to the NFL, I mean, having the hash marks at different distances, I mean, in college, it's such a different game with a boundary receiver. Like you have a lot less space to work with. So
huge.
I can kind of see why it's becoming less, relevant to call it like a really important to have just an X guy, because I mean, the space is relatively, it is shorter depending on which hash or what part of the field you're on, but it's not as extreme as it is in college.
Yeah. And really, I think that comes in big in like scouting, where you can have this X type body and then you're playing with all this space in college. And then the team's like, oh, perfect, we found our X. And then, oops, by the way, it's Traylon Burks or it's Keon Coleman.
Yeah.
Or the new example, I'll call my shot here, is Jaden Higgins, which everything tells you about their measurables, how they looked, what they did in college, their usage. They're an X receiver, but then everything gets condensed to the NFL and you're like, oh, wait, they're way better suited as a power slot. And I think that's
great point.
That's where the league is going. But if that keeps going that way, then you're going to have this huge dearth of X receivers who can beat press coverage. And then when you got one of them, like A.J. Brown, like Nico Collins, they're absolutely lethal, because teams they're committing just as much, if not more, resources to stop these super slots as they are on the outside. And it's a lot harder to help on the outside.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Getting into the next one. What would you say? I'll give this. Okay. All right. Well, for those who are fans of the show, they'll know there's some lore behind this, which is kind of funny. But I'll kick this over to Sam because he knows Jahan personally. So what would you say his strengths and weaknesses are? And this one's from Dylan.
Yeah. So the thing I've always loved about Jahan Dotson, besides the person, because he is an incredible person, one of the nicest human beings, is one of the smoothest runners I've ever seen. And not just route run, just the way his movement is. I said this on the Inside the Data podcast. Coach Jared Parker was the wide receiver coach when we were there. And in his Southern accent, I just kept hearing, that man moves like a gazelle. He does. It's so smooth. The way he gets to his top speed, I love it. I like his release. His hands are pretty good. I mean, especially considering his smaller catch radius. And I think he's an underrated vertical threat. And you might disagree with me there because of some of the other things. But those are the things I'd say his strengths. Now, weaknesses. Number one, he grew up a Cowboys fan. That is true, but that's not actually a weakness.
Oh, my.
Weaknesses, I would say. Small catch radius, like we talked about, it's not great. He's not that great after catch, like as much as you'd want him to be. And he doesn't win consistently on press. And that's like a big problem that he has. And yeah, that's kind of how I'd profile him, honestly.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like I've gotten an unfair billing that I'm like a Dotson hater because I repeatedly talk about how he's not maximizing the system. But it's just that. He goes to a team like the Vikings. He goes to a team like Tampa, where they're they have these fancy trip sets and bunches, and they're running a bunch of zone, like void attackers, where they're clearing guys out and then they're bringing another guy across into a void in the zone. in the intermediate part of the field, I think Dotson's awesome. But the Eagles, they just like to run like corner routes on the outside, goes, hitches, and it's like, okay, where's the spot for him? And there's one weakness I think you didn't quite allude to that I thought was a major weakness watching is when he's playing out of the slot and there's a nickel over him that's like 5 yards off. Often what a nickel is asked to do is reroute the inside receiver. And then you could do a myriad of other duties after that. Go to the flat, cover the running back, zone off wherever you are. And when he got rerouted, he went flying across the field into other people's areas. So you would see many times on film where he would be either on the same side or opposite side from the tight end, and they're running kind of, either up the alleys or towards the middle of the field between the numbers, anywhere, and they get shoved into each other. You've now negated both routes, and one guy can cover them, which means the other guy can go find other work. It's a disaster for a passing offense, especially.
I mean, spacing is important.
Yeah, especially against zone. When you have a quarterback who likes to pull the trigger when the guy's clearly open, and then you have your tight ends, not named Goddard, and Dotson getting shoved into each other, your options are dwindling fast. So you end up dropping back going, no AJ, oh crap, and I'm scrambling. And in that sense, I feel like if you had a guy who was just stronger through his release, it would be more helpful. And also,
Absolutely.
like, you don't want to throw like a 15-yard crosser to Dotson and like have a safety bearing down on him. Like, that's just not a good recipe. Whereas Darius Cooper, he could absorb those kind of plays. Like, he is as big as a safety. And he doesn't he actually pushes the defensive guy off. Like, it's a totally different deal when he's coming out.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We had a comment come in about Jalen seemed to vibe with him towards the end of this last year from Adam. And I do think that's important. I think that's really important. And I think you'll see that. One thing I will note is that it's possible they still move him. I think it's important people recognize that there is a chance with the Metchie trade that they're not done making moves. And Dotson is somebody that there are a little bit of rumblings that there could be movement. I wouldn't be shocked. But I do think it is really important to have chemistry between Jalen and his receivers, and honestly between the receivers. And I think that's where Metchie fits in really well too, especially with his relationship with Devonta Smith. I think relationships is what makes this team successful. It's a big proponent of why they're successful. So, and I really love that comment. So thank you for putting it.
Getting into this next one. Jason Nolan, what is Fangio's sight concept and what should I look for on film? Okay, so this is for the film junkies. Sight is actually like a coverage tag. So this is something that you'll have your base coverage. So say it's cover 9, which is Fangio's weak rotation cover 3. So you have your nickel, you have Cooper DeJean on one side. The safety opposite of Cooper DeJean, he's the one who's coming down to play a hook zone or a curl flat. And sight gets tagged on top of that call. And what it is a specialty check where if a tight end is in the backfield, so you could look like 4 partners will do this, or the number 2 to one side is in the backfield. So just for general purposes, the most outer receiver is the number 1. Then who's ever inside of that is the number 2. Whoever's inside of that is the number 3. So in twin sets, that means 2 receiving threats to either side. I guess when I do that, it makes confetti come down.
I want confetti.
So in twin sets, 2 receivers to either side, and you have
You got balloons now.
And you've got a tight end in the backfield. What this tells is the safety stays high and the linebacker covers everything to the flat. Whereas typically they would be rotating down and the safety would cover the flat. But the reason this happens, and I'm not for sure on this, but it just makes intuitive sense, is that why recruit a safety to cover the flat when the number 2 threat is already so far back? They're all the way in the backfield and they're a tight end. So they're not going to threaten you vertically. Now I'd rather keep the deep help and just let the linebacker take that duty. I bet all my money that is actually the case of why they make that check. So yeah, that's what that is. It's actually not you can't tag that on any coverage. It's relevant to coverages where you're spinning a safety down. So like not cover 4 where they stay back. All right.
We did get a question in the comments.
Great. Let's see.
And I may have reframe it because I kind of think you would want me to, but it's how many yards does Saquon run for this year? And I think at the essence of the question is, will there be a regression? Do you expect a regression in his yards this year?
Oh, you're asking me?
I'm asking you, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I remember in this summer, there was a college kid who reached out to me. He said, I made this cool project that looked at every 2,000-yard rusher. And he made this website, and he goes, here's every single rushing stat you could ever think of. And he visualized what they did in the year after. And one thing that really stuck out to me, first off, they never play a full allotment of games. And they always go to 4.2 yards per carry. I believe Saquon's well into the 5s, mid to upper 5s last year. There's a good chance.
He was 5.8.
5.8. It's insane on his volume. So there's a really strong chance that comes crashing down. My guess is probably 4.8. If you look at Vegas, last year, over or under rushing yards, they were right around 1,000 because there was no indication that Saquon would stay healthy. But he did, and he ran for double that. Now their over-under is 1,400 something. So people might look at that and be like, whoa, he just ran for 2,000, 1,400 is nothing. Well, they're still factoring in the chance of the injury. So if he stays healthy, he's going to run for big numbers. Like you're talking 1,500, 1,600, and I consider that big. But is there a chance he misses some time? I think it's highly, highly likely. So maybe he would be on pace for, call it 1,650 yards, but then he ends up with like 1,380. That's really what I see as a likely outcome. What do you got?
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab, LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
Whether it's a movie night or just midday, Skinny Pop is a salty snack that keeps on giving. Made with just 3 simple ingredients for an irresistibly delicious taste and a large serving size that lasts. Deliciously popped, perfectly salted. Skinny Pop, popular for a reason. Shop Skinny Pop now.
Jif peanut butter. It's that Jiffing good. It doesn't really need advertising. So instead, enjoy the calming sounds of the ocean. Jif. Ooh, it's that Jiffing good. Get your Jif at Jif.com.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan. $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
The Jack Welch Management Institute at Strayer University helps you go from, I know the way, to I've arrived with our top 10 ranked online MBA. Gain skills you can learn today and apply tomorrow. Get ready to go from make it happen to made it happen and keep striving. Visit strayer.edu/Jack Welch MBA to learn more. Strayer University is certified to operate in Virginia by Chev and has many campuses, including at 2121 15th Street North in Arlington, Virginia.
Well, so they were talking about the lines, what the lines are for sports bet. I don't sports bet either, but I was just curious what they were at. His total rushing yards are 1,500.5 is minus 110 for over under. So they expect, I think for over it's minus 110.
1,500 is insane. Like that must be the highest over under of all time.
It's
Seriously.
pretty crazy. But yeah, listen, is that a repeatable thing? It's really hard to repeat that. And there's just so many assumptions that go in. Like you said, health is a huge part of it. I would say that, opportunity will be there should he remain healthy. So that's not a huge concern. I do think the offensive line, depending on health of them, is a big part of it. One of the big parts of their success is there were a lot of injuries. I think more than people recognize on the offensive line. Those guys missed time, but the backup stepped up and did their job. And so it's really about the depth of the offensive line too. There's so much that goes into it. Do I expect him to get 2,000 yards again? No, I think that's an unrealistic expectation. Is it possible? Sure. But I agree mostly with what you said. Actually, completely with what you said. So
I realize we have like 10 more. Maybe we should save some of these. Maybe we'll get like 2 more and then we'll do like 2 more from the comments.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're Kevin Patullo, what reliable plays and concepts from previous OCs would you use this year? And I would recommend, we did one of our very first, I think the very first podcast or maybe the second ever we did, I did a whole segment on this where I showed clips of exact plays that I loved. So I'd recommend searching that, and I could help point you at that. I've also written multiple posts on Twitter about this. I've even written a whole Medium article on how I'd upgrade the Eagles offense. So I'd go look that up, like Eagles Eric, how I'd upgrade the Eagles offense. I've written about this like a lot. Give you a quick summary. First off, I'll talk about reality. The way they've talked about Kevin Patullo's offensive design is taking their staple plays and then making offshoots of those plays that are counters. So everyone knows the Eagles love running this route combination where they have the outside guy run like a 3 to 5 yard in, and then the inside guy runs a corner route. Okay. 72, China, whatever you want to call it. They run it over and over again against every single team. It's very easy to read. It cooks man coverage. It worked. But if the other team knows you're going to run it, it's obviously not good. And they almost threw a couple interceptions on it. So when they're talking about Patullo, they talk about constraint plays. So a constraint play means you've got your staple, you got your base play. How can we modify that to, if a team is loading up to stop our base play, oops, by the way, we're actually going over here. Or you think it's a corner out, surprise, it's actually a post. Any type of tweak that takes advantage of the other team thinking they know what you're going to do is a constraint play. That's where Kevin Patullo has already literally said that they're going to do that. And so you just got to think about what are their staple concepts. Drive, Hank, China, they got mesh, they've got QB counter bash. So all of those plays, and then all their gap scheme stuff, like you just come up with the counters off of those plays, make it look exactly like that play. Oh, by the way, the quarterback's keeping it. I'm actually not hitting the shallow. Now AJ Brown on the mesh, he's running some kind of designer route out the back.
Yeah,
whatever.
Put a mesh climb on it.
Yeah.
Too.
There's one called Stash, which is an Andy Reid concept, which is essentially mesh return, where they are going like they're going to run a mesh, and we just go back outside.
Yep.
And that absolutely fries man coverage.
The Eagles actually for mesh. Mesh is one of my favorite concepts.
Yeah. And who's a Hall of Fame quarterback who we interviewed who hates mesh?
I think it rhymes with work cork.
Yeah. So, and I actually had talked with him personally, like what it is that he hates about it, and it's that it doesn't have good zone answers. And I was like, oh, well, what if you just did this with the guys outside of the mesh? He's like, okay, I love it. So really, I think he just hates the traditional mesh that doesn't have good zone answers. And you watch, like the Eagles ran a mesh against the Browns against like cover 2. It was the worst play I've ever seen. Every receiver was on the ground, like McCord running for his life, or it might have been DTR.
Either way, I know what you're saying. The thing with mesh, though, like a lot of what makes it successful, and like we had at Penn State, we actually revamped our mesh concept. We had consultants. We had Bill Laser come in, and he taught us like different what we could do on it. One of the things he taught us was this mesh climb. Like we ran a drive with mesh, so like a basic route on top with the 2 mesh, and then you had the guy coming off the opposite side climb and to that zone, that area. So like that was a big thing that we did at Penn State that really helped us a lot. And the teams, we didn't have it on film, so like we ran that against Michigan and Ohio State, and it worked really well when they were in. Well, Ohio State didn't really run zone too much on us, but
because when like the nice thing about that is if they're in man, well then you just hit the traditional mesh route. But if they're in zone, what's going to happen is that like nickel, or if the outside corners and cloud technique is, they're going to be right there and the mesh is going to come right into their zone. But now they're just getting depth going behind them. So you just go right over them and it's open. Like that's such an easy upgrade to it. You could even have that be a conversion route where if the guy's running across and he just sees that there's a bunch of guys like hanging out at 5 yards across the field, then he just gets depth. Like I could see that happening on the fly.
Absolutely.
Too.
And then on the basic, we had a couple zone answers. We had like where you would just sit on the basic if you saw zone. So
yeah, there's like this viral clip from Ricky Pearsall from the preseason where he's on, I forget what they call this route, but some kind of like search route. It's kind of like this crossing route, but he's getting to the other side of the field and he's out leveraged and there's like a zone defender out there and he clearly reads it and then stops and like gets in space and makes a catch. And then people are like, Pearsall's going for what, 1,200 or whatever. And by the way, I met Ricky Pearsall at Whole Foods getting flowers at Valentine's Day, and he was a really nice guy. Like we had a whole conversation. So I'm rooting for the guy, just not when we play him. All right. We got
that's fair.
I said I promised 2 questions from the comments. So here we go. Where do you guys think Jalen ends up in the player survey? Oh, that's interesting. Do you want to go first?
See, I'm so conflicted because why don't you go first? I'm going to collect my thoughts on it a little bit.
Probably like 10.
See, I wouldn't be shocked if he is higher or lower. Like it
can't be outside the top 100.
No, what I'm saying is 16 or 3. Like I could see him anywhere in that range.
Some people think like because he hasn't been named yet that he's not on the list, which is obviously wrong.
Oh, he's on the list.
Yeah.
I mean, this was made by the players and he's
there's some funny business with this list too, because and someone should fact check me on this, but my understanding is this was determined before the playoffs.
I did not know that.
And I'm sure that it's not. I'm sure that Jalen Hurts, when he was in the Super Bowl last time, wasn't he insanely high, like number 3 on the list?
I think he was either 3 or 4.
Yeah. So now he's won the Super Bowl. Where do you think he's going to be? Like he's going to probably be in the top 10, honestly.
But I wouldn't be shocked if he wasn't. Like it's just the range of outcomes is like, that's why I'm so conflicted. It could go either way. And I think there's justification either way.
It's good marketing. It's fun thought exercise, but it's completely useless. Like, how are you going to compare players across positions? I've talked about this a little bit in like previous podcasts, but not only can the public not disentangle individual players when they're trying to determine credit in a given play, in a season, factor in the coaches too. From what I've talked to, and I've talked to many people in the NFL, I don't think the NFL has figured that out. And one good example is if you look at the contract market, there's clearly still inefficiencies. There's some positions that are not getting paid what they should be. There's some positions, guard, that the top of the market is absolutely absurd. It makes no sense. So I guess what I'm trying to say is even the people who know the most don't know which person is driving the winning the most. And you can use intuition and be like, obviously everyone knows the quarterback's the most important position. That's not but to what extent? How much more? And then how about the edge? Oh, how about the offensive coordinator? If you had to break all credit up into 100%, how much would you divvy up to Vic Fangio? How much would you divvy up to Jalen Hurts? That's a fun thought exercise. And I would just tell you good luck, because you'd end up putting Cooper DeJean 1.5%, and then people would have pitchforks waiting to take you out. So that's something I want to investigate further. If you could crack that code, you would be the god of NFL analytics. If you could actually say, here's one number to describe the relative impact of a player in this 22 player interaction, which has the context of injuries that you don't know about, play calls that you don't know about, what their position coaches are telling them, literally the condition of the turf and their equipment they're wearing. Good luck.
100%.
All right. We got one more. Did you have more? Did you have anything you wanted to add on that? Okay.
No, I like it. We're good.
All right. Last one. Travis, was the success of our offense in the NFC Championship game and Super Bowl due to Jalen breaking off big gains in the run game, or did they open up the playbook and do different things scheme-wise? Did you want to take a first crack at this?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I will say the offense was successful because they played very good complementary football. I mean, listen, especially in the Super Bowl, when the run was not working, they started passing well. They started doing, stretching the ball both vertically and horizontally, but not necessarily out of the run game. They were able to do it with screens or other type of ways. They were playing good football, and they were able to make plays when there was a deficit in one of the areas or the other. That's how I'd answer this question. I'd love to hear a little bit more in depth on the schematic part from you, if you have that ready to go. But
yeah,
sure.
I think it's another loaded question. I don't think it's this or that. I think it's all of the above. Did they take the governor off Jalen Hurts in the run game? Yes. Did that have a impact on the offense playing better? Absolutely.
Most definitely.
When you go to game plan against the Dan Quinn or Steve Spagnuolo, they're going to want to go down swinging. And so one of the best things you could possibly do is say, I don't care what you're going to do. My quarterback can beat your blitz by running. And they did it. And what a backbreaker it is to feel like you've got the whole back end locked up. You got a free rusher, but then Jalen Hurts is just out the other side running for 20 yards over and over again. So yes, I think it was a dramatic impact. They did open up the playbook scheme wise. I would say they had some wrinkles. They definitely added some stuff. They had some of these two-man concepts with Goddard and Brown spacing on the outside against the Commanders. That was highly effective. And the Commanders were trying to put a bunch of guys in the middle of the field, and they were vulnerable in the alley there, and they kept hitting them for moderate gains with some yak. The other thing is the Commanders really struggled to tackle. It's just funny to see these little defensive backs just getting absolutely mauled by our linemen downfield. And then even if they avoid that, they have to try to corral Saquon in the open field. So they just couldn't do it physically. In the Super Bowl, I would say Spagnuolo, what a bizarre game plan. I just couldn't understand it. And I posted a montage on Twitter of 80% of these double mug and amoeba fronts that other teams used against the Eagles. This is essentially when they pack everyone up on the line of scrimmage. And the Eagles did not handle it well. I think they maybe had 2 completions all year against that. And one of them, people remember that Goddard check where he scored the stiff arm touchdown against the Packers, and that was against the front like that. But really, there was nothing even like there was no magic to that play call. It was like 2nd and 2 or something, and the corners were playing off. Like they were giving up that first down, and then Goddard just bossed that guy. So I don't know why they didn't run a single one of those the entire Super Bowl. Absolute terrible game plan. Made no sense. It was a clear weakness from the Eagles. They didn't even make them honor that. They ran a million blitzes from depth that had no chance of getting there. Hurts just sat back there pretty, delivered dimes all over the field. So, like they hit A.J. Brown. That was like a mesh play. They just changed up the formation. In fact, I think afterwards they said that it was a botch formation. Like the tight ends were lined up on the wrong side or something like that. They hit that dagger. They hit the big post against the Bengals and the Giants. The Dotson play. That was just like a check against press man, right? Something that they had done all year. They've got their little hand signal, and there you go. So, like, it wasn't that much new stuff, to be honest with you. And they're just executing really well against a team that was like 10th ranked defensive EPA per play over the second half of the season. Like, the Chiefs were not that good defensively. They were very good situationally when they needed that stop or they needed to get a sack or interception. They were able to do that, usually through Spagnuolo scheming up something. But that was not existent in the Super Bowl. But do you have anything else you wanted to add on that?
I love Adam's comment again about Todd Bowles, blitz. Every time they play Tampa, they struggle because of the pressure that they're able to bring. So it's interesting that Spagnuolo is just like, nah, we're not going to, do exactly what Tampa did and the blueprint to shut down the Eagles. And again, they have handled it better.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny that Todd Bowles gives Hurts the most problems, and that's his exact game plan? The time I saw Hurts was more frustrated than any other play in his career was Tampa is showing this like zero blitz, but what they did is they took like the weak side linebacker and they had him fly across the formation to replace the blitzer on the other side, which is very unorthodox. And the Eagles had like a screen dialed up to that side to where the blitzers are coming. And it was like to Paris Campbell. And I'm getting like 1 yard. And Hurts was so mad. He was like, this should be like a freaking touchdown.
Yeah.
So, I wrote about this a little bit. Like, if I were a defensive coordinator going against the Eagles, I would use a lot of zone defense, a lot of too high. I would have a lot of mug fronts, and sometimes you got to bring them. Overload blitzes gave them problems.
Now, here's the question. Do you think we're going to see a lot more of that this year? Those concepts?
Well, the reason that we didn't see some of that stuff more is you play too high zone. Well, now you're going to have problems stopping Saquon behind the behemoth 100%. Offensive lines. And I understand that. Maybe the answer is cheetah type packages where you bring in extra defensive linemen, but you replace your linebackers with a safety or a nickel or something like that. I mean,
that's where the league's going anyway. Like, those packages are a lot more of what you see anyway. So I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, maybe it is such that the Eagles are really good at attacking linebackers. Like, they're just not able. Like, if you remember, there was a few games where the Eagles run defense or run offense got slowed down. Cleveland did it. Baltimore did it. In the Super Bowl, the Chiefs did it.
They did.
And the one Commanders game, the first Commanders game. So, and I understand they had like 200 yards combined rushing, but like there was big swaths, like the whole first 3 quarters, Saquon was limited. A lot of those teams did it with their fronts. It wasn't like Roquan Smith 17 tackles or even like Bobby Wagner or whoever the Browns linebackers were last year. It was like a lot of their like interior guys. Like what a lot of it was the Eagles would like combo block, and then like Mekhi Becton or Juergens would get over eager and like try to get up to the second level, and then the guy who they just vacated would make the play. So I feel like extra defensive linemen would help stopping the run more than like more linebackers, for example. Like
100%.
The Lions, they're a team who like to put a lot of linebackers out there, and like their front was lackluster. I mean, I understand. Liam McNeil's awesome, but like their edge defenders. So that's a team I feel like would struggle mightily to stop the Eagles' run offense. Now they have a totally different defensive coordinator, and that might not be the case anymore, versus a team like the Broncos or even the Seahawks, where they've just got a million offensive or defensive linemen, and they'll put out base fronts and they'll put out 6-1. I think that would give the run game some issues, but then you have Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, so you're fine.
Well said.
All right. Great. Well, that was a fun episode. We still have a ton of mailbags in store for next time. So if we didn't get to your question, we will in a future episode. Appreciate everyone who stopped by. And until next time, this has been another episode of Eagles Edge.